The devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows is born of the deep recognition of the suffering experienced by the Mother of God throughout her life, especially during the Passion of Christ. From the beginning, Mary was intimately united to the mystery of redemption, participating in a singular way in the mission of her Son. When the child Jesus was presented in the temple, Mary and Joseph heard from Simeon prophetic words that would mark the heart of the Virgin forever. This child is set for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and a sword will pierce your own soul. Luke 2:34-35. These words were not merely symbolic, they were the direct announcement that Mary would not be only the mother of the Redeemer, but also the co-redemptrix, who would suffer mystically with him and for him. There began her Via Dolorosa, a path of love and silent sacrifice that would only deepen with time. Simeon's prophecy was like a shadow that began to accompany Mary in every moment of her maternal life. Although she experienced the incomparable joy of holding God in her arms, she knew in the depths of her immaculate heart that the future of the child was marked by rejection, by suffering, and by a violent death. This awareness did not steal her joy, but made it deeper and more serene, for it was a joy tempered by sacrifice. While many parents dream of great earthly achievements for their children, Mary knew that Jesus' greatest deed would be the cross. Therefore, the sword announced by Simeon was not a sudden blow, but an open and silent wound that grew as the years of Jesus advanced. Catholic tradition recognizes this first moment as Mary's first sorrow, the prophecy of Simeon. In this sorrow, we see that Mary accepts God's designs with faith and courage, even when they include suffering. She does not protest, she does not question the divine plan, but embraces it with an open heart. This attitude makes Mary a perfect model for all Christians who face the crosses of life. She teaches us that sorrow is not the end, but a path that can lead to redemption when accepted in union with God. The docility with which Mary welcomes that prophecy is the first testimony of her active participation in the mystery of salvation. Upon hearing the prophecy, Mary also understood that her motherhood would be lived in two dimensions, one natural as the mother of the child Jesus, and another supernatural as the spiritual mother of all who would be redeemed by him. This double mission would demand of her not only maternal care, but a heart ready to offer her very son in sacrifice. This foreknowledge of the Passion gave Mary a unique spiritual maturity, even in her youth. While others did not understand the ways of God, Mary kept and pondered them in her heart. Thus, the sword of Simeon began to shape Mary's heart so that it would become like that of Christ himself, a heart that loves until it suffers and that suffers while loving. This suffering did not isolate her from God. On the contrary, it brought her even closer. By accepting that painful prophecy, Mary did not close herself in sadness, but united herself more deeply to the will of the Father. This trusting surrender is what makes her an example for all who face trials. Instead of fleeing from suffering, Mary offered it. Instead of rebelling, she abandoned herself. This confident abandonment, lived from the first steps of Jesus' life, prepared Mary to bear with fortitude the future sorrows that would come, each more intense than the last. Her soul was being purified and strengthened by obedience, just as gold is purified by fire. In popular piety, this first sorrow is usually represented as the beginning of the chaplet of the 7 Sorrows of Our Lady, a devotion that invites the faithful to meditate on Mary's sufferings throughout the life of Christ. This devotion has ancient roots and arose with the Servites, Order of the Servants of Mary, in the 13th century, who spread the practice as a way to unite the hearts of the faithful to Mary's sorrowful heart. In contemplating Simeon's prophecy, devotees are called to recognize that suffering is part of the Christian path, and that with Mary, it is possible to endure it with love. This moment marks the beginning of a profound spiritual itinerary that unites sorrow to love and transforms suffering into a source of redemption. It is important to understand that Mary's sorrow was not merely sentimental or psychological, but spiritual and redemptive. The sword that pierces her soul symbolizes an intimate participation in the passion of Christ, not merely as a spectator, but as a collaborator. While Eve cooperated in the fall of humanity, Mary, the new Eve, cooperates in its salvation. This cooperation does not diminish the work of Christ, but magnifies it, for it shows that God willed to include the free yes of a creature in the fulfillment of his plan of love. This mystery is an invitation for every Christian to unite his or her sufferings to those of Christ through Mary, thus becoming a co-worker in the redemption of the world. This spiritual perspective transforms the way we see suffering. Mary did not seek it, but when it came, she welcomed it out of love. Her sorrow was purified by love, and love was proven by sorrow. Simeon's prophecy was like a seed of martyrdom planted in her heart, which would bloom fully at the foot of the cross. But this martyrdom did not express itself in cries or despair, but in silence and firmness. She remained standing, like the strong woman of the gospel, showing that true strength is not the absence of tears, but fidelity to God even when tears fall. Thus, Mary becomes not only an example of suffering, but of persevering hope. Mary's experience also teaches that sorrow and joy can coexist in the heart of one who loves God. She carried the sword of the prophecy and at the same time the joy of the presence of the Savior. This shows that the Christian life is not made only of consolations, but also of crosses that must be embraced with faith. Marian spirituality invites the faithful not to flee from suffering, but to discover in it a path of union with God. When sorrow comes, we can look to Mary and remember that she also wept, suffered, but did not lose faith. She is the mother who understands our tears because she too shed hers. For all these reasons, Simeon's prophecy marks the beginning of the itinerary of Our Lady's sorrows, revealing the greatness of her soul and the depth of her mission. This first sorrow is like the dawn of a long and dark Calvary, that she would walk alongside Jesus. As we meditate on it, we are invited to welcome the sufferings that God permits in our lives, not as punishments, but as opportunities to love more deeply. Sorrow does not destroy love. When lived with faith, it purifies it. And Mary, by accepting that sword that would pierce her soul, became for all of us the Queen of Martyrs, the sorrowful mother who accompanies each of her children amid the crosses of life. After Simeon's prophecy, which had already wounded Mary's heart with the prospect of Jesus' future passion, the second great sorrow was not long in manifesting itself: the flight into Egypt. Shortly after the visit of the Magi, an angel appeared to Saint Joseph in a dream and ordered him to flee with the child and his mother to Egypt, for King Herod planned to kill the child. That command was sudden, with no time for planning or farewells, forcing the Holy Family to leave their homeland in haste. Imagine Mary's suffering at having to tear herself away from the simple home she had prepared with so much love for the Son of God, setting out toward the unknown, with Jesus' life threatened by a cruel king. This sorrow was not only a mother's anguish, but a direct participation in the persecution that the world was already beginning to mount against the Redeemer. The flight into Egypt was a long and exhausting journey, crossing deserts and hostile regions. There were no comfortable roads nor guaranteed safety. Mary carried the child Jesus in her arms, protecting him from the scorching sun by day and the intense cold at night, while Joseph led the donkey that bore the little they had been able to gather in haste. Each step of that journey was marked by the fear of being pursued by Herod's soldiers, who were spreading terror in Bethlehem and surrounding areas. Mary knew that the Son she carried with her was the Savior of the world, but now she found herself forced to hide him as a fugitive. This tension between the greatness of the mission and the humiliation of the human condition made her heart bleed with silent sorrow. The condition of exiles was profoundly humiliating for Mary and Joseph. They left behind their land, their language, their customs, and had to live as foreigners in a pagan country where the gods of Egypt were worshipped and the customs were so different from Jewish tradition. For a woman as deeply devout as Mary, living amid an idolatrous environment hostile to the faith was a constant spiritual sorrow. She, who had been chosen to be the living tabernacle of the Most High God, now found herself surrounded by temples of idols and profane rituals. This experience of being a stranger and marginalized drew Mary even closer to the suffering her son would face in the future, when he too would be rejected by his own people and handed over to the pagans to be crucified. The flight into Egypt also revealed Mary's unshakable trust in divine providence. Despite insecurity, poverty, and fear, she never doubted that the Heavenly Father would care for them. This firm and silent faith sustained the Holy Family in exile. Mary did not complain, did not murmur, but prayed and trusted. Her serene and confident gaze strengthened Joseph's heart as he carried the responsibility of protecting the Son of God and his mother. This attitude of faith in the face of adversity makes Mary a perfect model for all mothers who face difficult and unexpected situations in life. She shows that trust in God is stronger than any threat. While Mary faced the material hardships of the journey and of life in exile, her maternal heart was torn by the news of the massacre of the innocents in Bethlehem. Knowing that so many children had been brutally murdered because of Herod's envy, and that those mothers wept inconsolably, was an immense weight upon her compassionate soul. Although Jesus had escaped, the price of that immediate salvation seemed to be the blood of innocents. Mary suffered not only as a mother, but as the new Eve, united to the sorrow of all the mothers of humanity. She carried in her heart not only the life of Jesus, but also the lives cut short by the wickedness of men, foreseeing the universal suffering that sin would cause her son. This sorrow of the flight also reveals the poverty with which the Son of God chose to come into the world. The Creator of the universe, who could have come with glory and power, willed to be born poor and to be persecuted from the first days of life. Mary understood that this humiliation was part of the plan of salvation. Every discomfort they faced in Egypt, every meager meal, every suspicious look from foreigners, were for her like thorns driven into her heart, which she offered in silence to God for the salvation of the world. This acceptance of poverty and suffering anticipated the way of the cross, showing that redemption would not come through human power, but through sacrifice. Mary's presence in Egypt also had a profound spiritual meaning for the history of salvation. Just as once the people of Israel had gone down to Egypt with Jacob and later left it with Moses, now the very God-made man went down to Egypt to sanctify it with his presence. Mary, as the new Ark of the Covenant, carried within herself the incarnate Word and brought him to that pagan land, signaling that salvation would not be only for Israel, but for all nations. This awareness strengthened her heart amid difficulties, for she knew that even that exile was part of God's universal plan. Her suffering was not in vain. It was redemptive, silent, and fruitful. When at last they were able to return from Egypt after Herod's death, the joy of returning to the land of Israel was accompanied by the deep marks left by the experience of exile. Mary returned more mature in sorrow, stronger in faith, and more deeply united to the mystery of the cross. The flight into Egypt had been a true anticipated Calvary, in which she learned to hide the Savior of the world and to protect him with her very life. This experience further shaped her heart for the supreme mission that would come, to remain standing at the foot of the cross, offering once again to the Father the Son whom she had protected with such love during that desperate flight. In Catholic piety, this second sorrow of Mary is contemplated as a mystery of trust, obedience, and silent suffering. The faithful who meditate on this sorrow learn from Mary to face moments of persecution and exile with the same serenity. The devotion to the seven sorrows invites us to see in Mary not a passive victim of suffering, but a strong woman who transforms sorrow into an offering. In fleeing to Egypt, she became the living image of all Christians who are forced to leave everything out of fidelity to God, finding in obedience the path to holiness. Her silent courage echoes like a beacon for all who face storms. Thus, the flight into Egypt was not merely a tragedy avoided, but an essential stage in Mary's sorrowful journey. It was a time of humiliation, fear, and uncertainties, but also of deep trust, hope, and fidelity. Mary shows us that even when everything seems lost, God is present and leads events for the good of those who love him. This second sorrow reveals Mary's maternal heart, which preferred to suffer exile and poverty rather than see her son perish. With this gesture, she sealed even more her role as the sorrowful mother and co-redemptrix, walking step by step with Christ toward Calvary. Among the most distressing sorrows in Mary's life stands out the episode in which she and Joseph lost the child Jesus during the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. When Jesus was 12 years old, they went together to the holy city for the feast of Passover, as was customary among devout Jews. After the celebrations were concluded, they set out back to Nazareth, believing that Jesus was among the relatives in the caravan. Only at the end of the first day's journey, when they looked for him among their acquaintances, did they realize that he was not there. That discovery was a profound and painful shock for Mary, who felt as if a sword once again pierced her heart. The child whom she had received by a miracle, the Son of the Most High God, had disappeared, and with him it seemed that all the light of her life had been extinguished. The desperate return to Jerusalem was marked by an indescribable sorrow. For 3 long days, Mary and Joseph searched for the boy everywhere, asking travelers, scouring alleys and the temple courts, facing the fear that he might have been injured, kidnapped, or killed. For any mother, losing a child is an almost unbearable torment, but for Mary, this loss bore an even greater weight. It was the promised Savior, the Redeemer awaited for centuries. The absence of Jesus was for her like a spiritual eclipse. The world seemed plunged into darkness, and every moment of uncertainty increased the silent suffering that consumed her maternal heart. During those 3 days of anguished search, Mary experienced a kind of suffering that was not physical, but deeply spiritual. The loss of contact with Jesus symbolized the apparent withdrawal of God's presence, like a dark night of the soul. Although by faith she knew that the Father had a perfect plan for his Son, Mary felt in her humanity the helplessness and loneliness that the saints experience when God seems absent. This sorrow of separation was a preparation for the great separation that would come on the cross, when she would see Jesus die before her eyes. The loss in the temple was like a prelude to the Passion, an anticipation of the sword that would tear her soul on Calvary. The encounter in the temple, when they finally found Jesus among the teachers, was an indescribable relief, but also a moment of mystery. When Mary questioned him with tenderness and sorrow, "Son, why have you done this to us?" Jesus replied, "Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Luke 2, 48-49. This answer, though full of divine wisdom, sounded like a new sword for Mary, for it revealed that Jesus' mission was above every human bond, including the maternal one. She understood that, although she was his mother, she could not hold him to herself, because he belonged to the Father. This understanding brought her a serene joy, but also a discreet and deep wound, that of a mother who must, out of love, learned to detach herself from her very Son. This experience was a painful school of faith for Mary. For 3 days, she lived what many Christians experience, the feeling that God is distant or absent, even when one loves Him deeply. This trial served to purify her faith and love even more, showing that to love God does not always mean to understand Him. Even without fully grasping the ways of the Son, Mary remained faithful, without complaining, without rebelling, accepting that the Father's designs are often mysterious. She kept all those words in her heart, as the Gospel relates, allowing sorrow to be transformed into inner light. This attitude makes her a perfect model for all who go through dark nights in faith. Beyond the spiritual sorrow, the loss of Jesus in the temple also brought a feeling of unworthiness and powerlessness. Mary, the Immaculate One, chosen to be the mother of the Messiah, experienced the humiliation of feeling unable to fulfill the mission of caring for the Son of God. It was as if she had failed, and that feeling of unworthiness increased the suffering. Yet this humiliation was permitted by God, so that Mary would learn to rely not on her own strength, but on divine grace. This purification of the maternal heart would make her even more fit to unite herself to Christ's sacrifice on the cross, where sorrow and humiliation would reach their apex. Thus, God shaped Mary's soul with the fire of trial. The loss in the temple also prefigures the mystery of the Church, which at times seems to lose Jesus amid the distractions and occupations of the world. Mary, who tirelessly sought the lost Son, is the icon of the Church that never gives up searching for Christ when He seems absent. This ecclesial dimension of Mary's sorrow reveals her role as mother of the nascent Church, which one day would suffer the apparent absence of the Lord in death and then rejoice in His resurrection. Mary's relentless search is an invitation for the faithful never to stop seeking Jesus, even when He seems hidden or distant, for whoever seeks Him with love will always find Him. In popular piety, this third sorrow is remembered as a mystery of persevering faith. Devotees contemplate the 3 days of searching as a symbol of the 3 nights that the soul may pass through in the spiritual life: the night of the senses, the night of faith, and the night of the Spirit. In all these stages, Mary becomes the faithful companion who encourages her children not to give up. She shows that the absence of God is not abandonment, but purification and the maturing of love. Her silent and persevering suffering in the temple is a light for all who go through moments of confusion and interior darkness, teaching that hope must be stronger than anguish. When Jesus returned with Mary and Joseph to Nazareth, He lived subject to them, and Mary kept all these things in her heart. This filial submission of Jesus after 3 days of absence was for Mary a consolation and a confirmation that the Son, though God, chose to live in obedience. Nevertheless, she never forgot the painful lesson of that episode. The Son had been given to her so that one day He might be given up. The joy of the reunion did not erase the wound of the loss, but transformed it into a silent offering to the Father. From then on, Mary began to live with a heart constantly detached, ready to hand Jesus over when the hour came. The loss of the child Jesus in the temple was, therefore, a deeply spiritual and formative sorrow for Mary. She experienced what it means to live faith without sensible supports, to love without possessing, to obey without understanding. This third sorrow reveals the greatness of her maternal heart and her full availability to God's designs. In meditating on it, the faithful learn to seek Jesus with perseverance, even when He seems distant, and to trust that every apparent absence can be transformed into a glorious reunion. Mary shows that sorrow can purify love, and that those who endure the night with faith will see the sun of God's presence shine again. The moment came when the sword prophesied by Simeon struck Mary's heart with unimaginable violence, the encounter with Jesus on the way to Calvary. After years of silently keeping the mysteries of the Son of God, Mary saw the culminating moment of her mission approach, not in silence and serenity, but amid the chaos and brutality of the Passion. When Jesus was condemned to death, carrying the cross on his wounded shoulders, Mary went out to meet him on the streets of Jerusalem, among cries, mockery, and blows from the soldiers. That sight of the bloodied, disfigured Son, staggering under the weight of the cross, was as if every blow that fell upon him also tore the mother's heart. There is no human sorrow comparable to that of a mother who sees her innocent child unjustly condemned to death. This encounter was not a long moment, but each second seemed like an eternity to Mary. Her eyes met those of Jesus, and in that silent gaze there occurred a deep and indescribable dialogue of love and suffering. No words were spoken, for there were no words that could contain the mystery of that instant. Mary wanted to run to him, embrace him, relieve him of the weight of the cross, wipe his wounded face. But she knew she could not. Her mission was not to prevent the sacrifice, but to participate in it with a pierced heart. In that gaze, Jesus seemed to say, "Mother, I am doing the will of the Father." And Mary, with tearful eyes, silently answered, "Son, I am with you to the end." The way to Calvary was filled with violence and humiliation. The narrow streets were full of dust, insults, soldiers pushing and whipping the Lord. Mary walked among the crowd, trying to draw near, being pushed and insulted as well, but she did not care. Her only desire was to be close to Jesus, even if only to suffer with him. She did not flee from sorrow. She did not hide out of fear, but faced the world's hostility to remain faithful. This silent courage shows the greatness of Mary's soul, who did not allow herself to be overcome by despair, but remained firm like a pillar beside the agonizing Son. Every step Jesus took was like a blow that resounded in her maternal heart. Mary's sorrow in this encounter was not only emotional, but also spiritual and redemptive. She knew that this sacrifice was necessary for the salvation of humanity, and therefore offered her Son inwardly to the Father. This offering was neither cold nor distant, but made with a heart torn by sorrow. Mary united her suffering to that of Jesus as a silent oblation, cooperating with him in the work of redemption. While Jesus offered his body, Mary offered her heart. That is why the Church calls her co-redemptrix, not because she saved by herself, but because, perfectly united to the will of God, she uniquely shared in the sorrow and self-offering of the Redeemer. Mary's presence on the Via Dolorosa is a sign that true love does not abandon in suffering. Many disciples fled, afraid of being arrested or killed, but Mary remained. She knew that she could not lighten Jesus' physical torments, but she could console him with her faithful presence. For Jesus, to see the maternal gaze that loved him amid the world's rejection was a silent balm. For Mary, to see the gaze of the Son who still recognized and loved her, even covered in blood and humiliation, was a consolation amid martyrdom. This encounter was a miracle of love at the heart of the Passion, a moment in which two hearts suffered together out of love for all humanity. This sorrow of Mary also reveals the depth of her faith. She knew that Jesus was the Son of God, and that he could, if he willed, destroy his enemies with a word. But Mary did not ask him to do so. She did not cry out for justice, nor beg for a miracle to free him from the cross. She knew that redemption would come only through suffering, and she lovingly accepted the Father's plan. This acceptance was not a cold resignation, but a heroic act of faith that united her even more to the Son's sacrifice. While the world saw only failure and defeat, Mary saw the hidden victory of the cross. This vision of faith amid horror makes her the supreme model of trust in God. The scene of the encounter between Mary and Jesus on the way to Calvary is contemplated deeply in popular piety, especially in the Stations of the Cross. Each time the faithful meditate on this station, they are invited to look to Mary as the sorrowful mother who accompanies her children in their crosses. She does not remove the cross, but walks beside it. This gesture teaches that true love does not eliminate sorrow, but transforms it into an offering. Mary shows that silent presence can be more powerful than 1,000 words, and that sometimes the greatest consolation we can offer to those who suffer is simply to be at their side. Her presence with Jesus is the model of all Christian compassion. At this moment of the Passion, Mary also definitively assumes her mission as Mother of the Church. By uniting her suffering to that of Christ, she becomes the spiritual mother of all who would be saved by the Son's sacrifice. Every drop of blood she saw fall from Jesus' body, every wound she contemplated, she offered for us. Her lacerated heart became a living tabernacle of redemptive love. The sorrow that could have crushed her soul became fruitful, generating life for all humanity. This maternal dimension of her sorrow makes every Christian able to look to her and say, "On that day, she also suffered for me." Mary's encounter with Jesus on the way to Calvary is also a call to fidelity. Even when everything seems lost, when injustice triumphs and sorrow seems crushing, Mary remains firm. She shows that true strength is not in avoiding suffering, but in standing upright in the midst of it. Her posture is not of despair, but of surrender. She does not shout, she does not protest, she does not try to prevent the cross, but places herself beside it. This silent gesture is one of the greatest acts of love in history. The mother who accompanies the Son to the altar of sacrifice, offering with him her very life for the sake of the world. This fourth sorrow marks the beginning of Calvary for Mary. From this moment on, she is no longer only the mother who suffers, but the woman of the Passion, the inseparable companion of the slain Lamb. Her presence beside Jesus shows that true love is faithful unto the cross. As we meditate on this encounter, we are invited not to flee from others' suffering, but to walk with them, as Mary walked with Jesus. This sorrow reveals the incomparable greatness of Mary's immaculate heart, which preferred to suffer with the Son than to live without him. And thus, in the silence of her gaze, she sealed her total union with the redemptive sacrifice of Christ. The most acute and piercing sorrow that crossed Mary's soul reached its apex on Calvary, when she remained standing at the foot of the cross, watching her beloved Son agonize and die. There is no human suffering that can compare to that of a mother who witnesses the execution of her innocent son, all the more when that son is the Son of God. He whom Mary conceived without sin, whom she nursed with tenderness, whom she saw grow in grace and holiness, was now nailed to a tree, exposed to mockery, bloodied and torn. Every nail that pierced Jesus' body invisibly pierced Mary's heart. She did not cry out. She did not despair, but her soul bled in silence, faithful to the will of the Father who permitted that sacrifice out of love for humanity. Calvary was a place of horror and derision. The crowds mocked Jesus, the soldiers cast lots for his garments, the chief priests insulted him, and only a few disciples remained faithful. Among them was Mary, firm and silent, wrapped in a dignity that contrasted with the brutality around her. John's Gospel emphasizes that standing by the cross of Jesus was his mother. Gen 19:25, like a beacon of fidelity in the midst of darkness. While all saw only a condemned man, Mary saw the Lamb of God offering himself for the entire world. This vision of faith made her remain upright, even with a broken heart. She was the strong woman of Genesis, the new Eve, who remained faithful where the old Eve had fallen. At each groan of Jesus, Mary suffered as if it were in her own body. When he said, "I thirst," her heart longed to relieve his anguish. When she heard him forgive those who crucified him, she felt her heart torn and at the same time filled with admiration. When she saw the blood and water flow from his wounds, she knew that every drop was the price of our salvation. Mary's suffering was not merely that of a mother who loses her son, but that of a woman who sees the sin of the entire world crush the body and soul of her innocent son. She bore spiritually the sins of all men upon her heart, uniting herself in a unique and unrepeatable way to Jesus' sacrifice. At this supreme moment of sorrow, Jesus, with a gesture of infinite love, entrusted Mary to John, and John to Mary. "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother." John 19:26-27. With these words, Mary officially became the mother of all the redeemed. Even at the height of sorrow, she opened her heart to receive as children those who were crucifying her own son. This shows that her love was greater than her sorrow. In receiving John as son, Mary there received all humanity. This maternal gift in the midst of the Passion is one of the greatest miracles in history. A mother who, upon losing the only begotten son, gains billions of sinful children and welcomes them with the same love with which she loved Jesus. When Jesus gave up his spirit to the Father, a terrible silence fell upon Calvary. The sky darkened, the earth trembled, and Mary remained motionless like a living statue of sorrow. Her son was dead. The whole world seemed to have lost its meaning. That life which she had brought into the world, which she had nourished with her milk and cradled in her arms, was now lifeless before her. Simeon's sword had struck her soul full force, tearing her heart completely. Yet even there, in the most absolute darkness, Mary did not lose faith. Her love remained standing amid the ruins, like a flame that the wind of sorrow could not extinguish. Her fidelity at that instant is the highest expression of human love united to divine grace. Calvary was also the altar of Mary's maternal priesthood. While Jesus offered his body in sacrifice, Mary offered her heart. She did not pronounce vows, did not utter solemn words, but made of her silence the most perfect fiat ever spoken by a creature. In consenting to the death of the Son, Mary completed the yes she had given at the Annunciation. If on that morning in Nazareth she said, "Let it be done to me according to your word," now on Golgotha she said, "Let it be done in him according to your will." This total surrender made Mary the sorrowful mother par excellence, and associated her in a singular way with the one redemptive sacrifice of Christ. Mary's suffering at the foot of the cross was also a reparatory suffering. She united her pierced heart to the oblation of the Lamb, offering herself as a spiritual victim for the sins of the world. Her eyes contemplated human wickedness in its rawest form, but her heart held no rancor, only compassion and forgiveness. Mary forgave while she suffered. Her sorrow did not turn against the executioners, but in their favor, silently asking that the blood of Jesus purify them. This attitude shows that her sorrow was not sterile but fruitful. From the cross of Christ and from Mary's torn heart, the Church was born, washed in the blood and tears of Calvary. Christian piety has always contemplated Mary at the foot of the cross as the Queen of Martyrs. Though she did not suffer physically the scourges and nails, she suffered spiritually everything that Jesus suffered, even more intensely because she loved him with a love without measure. While the martyrs suffer for Christ, Mary suffered with Christ. This perfect communion of sorrow and love makes her the mirror of the faithful Church, which remains with the Lord even when all seems defeat. Her sorrow did not distance her from God, but united her to him indissolubly, making her the woman of heroic faith who stands firm at the foot of the cross. To contemplate Mary on Calvary is to contemplate love brought to the extreme. It is to see a mother who, even at the height of sorrow, does not revolt, does not give up, does not abandon, but remains. She teaches that true love does not flee from the cross, but remains faithful to the end. Her silent presence at the foot of the cross is an invitation for Christians also to remain firm with Jesus, even when everything seems lost. Mary shows that fidelity does not depend on circumstances, but on love. And the love that sustained her at that moment is the same love that today sustains the entire church. The love of a mother who suffered for us and continues to intercede for each of her children. Thus, Mary's fifth sorrow, the crucifixion and death of Jesus, is the summit of all her sorrows and also the source of all graces. It is there that Mary becomes fully the sorrowful mother, inseparably united to the Son's sacrifice. As we meditate on this mystery, we are invited to remain with her at the foot of the cross, offering also our sorrows and losses to the Father with love and trust. Mary shows that sorrow, when united to Christ, does not destroy, but saves. And in contemplating her there with a pierced heart, we discover that we are not alone in our crosses. The sorrowful mother is always at our side, as she was at Jesus' side, until his last breath. After witnessing her son's death on Calvary, Mary faced a new and searing sorrow, receiving in her arms the lifeless body of Jesus, taken down from the cross. The scene of the Pietà, so often represented in sacred art, is a silent expression of this indescribable sorrow. Mary, who so many times had cradled the sleeping child in her arms, now held the cold, bloodied and torn body of the Redeemer. Her heart was shattered into 1,000 pieces, but she remained serene, not for lack of sorrow, but because that sorrow was offered in union with her Son's consummated sacrifice. There were no words, only silent tears that fell upon Jesus' wounds, like one last gesture of maternal love. That moment was one of terrible and sublime intimacy. Mary contemplated up close every wound, every bruise, every drop of coagulated blood on her Son's face. She passed her fingers tenderly over the marks of the nails, kissed the brow crowned with thorns, cleaned with her own veil the disfigured face that had once brightened her home in Nazareth. Every gesture was a mixture of tenderness and agony. It was as if she wanted to give him back life with her touch, her tears, her kisses. But she knew that this was not the will of the Father. That silent contemplation was the last act of her martyrdom, to look upon the body of her dead Son and continue to believe that he is life. As Mary held the dead Jesus, the world seemed to have lost all meaning. The Son of God, who had healed the sick, raised the dead, forgiven sinners, and announced the kingdom, now lay there, inert and cold. It was as if hope had been buried with him. The disciples were scattered, the enemies jubilant, and heaven remained silent. Mary, however, even enveloped in the densest darkness of faith, did not waver. Her hope was not based on what she saw, but on what she believed. She believed that God would fulfill his promises, even though she did not know how. This heroic faith amid devastation is what makes Mary the supreme model of unshakable trust in God. Then came the most painful moment of all, to hand over Jesus' body to be buried. Mary, who had received the Son of God in her womb, who had given him birth, raised him and protected him, now had to let him go. The stone that closed the tomb seemed also to close her heart. Every step she took to move away from the sepulchre was like tearing her own soul out of herself. There were no cries or hysterical laments. There was only a silence full of tears, a love wounded yet firm. She left the tomb with her head held high and a broken heart, walking with the dignity of one who knows that even death will be conquered by love. This sorrow of Mary at Jesus' burial is called the sixth and the seventh sorrow, for in it are united the moment of receiving the Son's dead body and the moment of leaving him in the tomb. They are two sorrows that merge into a single prolonged agony. On the one hand, the final embrace. On the other, absolute detachment. This is perhaps the most silent and profound sorrow of all, because there is no possible action, only the acceptance of the mystery. Mary could no longer care for, protect, or console Jesus. All that remained to her was to believe. This bare and silent faith is the apex of her total surrender to God. Even plunged in sorrow, Mary remained the woman of hope. While everyone dispersed, she kept in her heart the words of the Son about the resurrection. She did not know when or how, but she hoped. This hope, however, was not triumphalistic, but humble, patient, and hidden. She did not demand signs, did not demand miracles, but simply trusted. Mary's attitude on Holy Saturday is deeply consoling for Christians who pass through periods of God's silence when everything seems lost. She shows that true hope does not need visible guarantees. It is enough to trust in the Father's love even when everything seems finished. The Church contemplates Mary at this moment as the mother of hope and the mother of the nascent Church. While Jesus' body rested in the tomb, she gathered the scattered disciples and sustained them with her prayerful presence. Even without understanding the way in which God would act, she knew that the plan of salvation had not ended there. Her heart, though shattered, was like a lamp lit in the dark night of faith. And from that lamp would spring the first light of the morning of the resurrection. Thus, Mary remained the only creature on earth who continued to believe fully in God's victory when everything seemed lost. This last sorrow of Mary teaches that true love requires detachment. Whoever loves must be willing not only to give, but also to let go, entrusting everything to God. Mary did not cling to her son's body, did not try to prevent the burial, but handed him over with a heart stripped of everything, like Abraham who offered Isaac. This absolute surrender makes her the model of mature faith, which does not depend on consolations, but relies only on God's fidelity. In leaving Jesus in the tomb, Mary also left her own will, becoming the perfect handmaid of the Lord to the end. Finally, this seventh sorrow completes Mary's sorrowful itinerary and reveals her as the sorrowful mother par excellence. She traversed the entire passion with the Son, from Simeon's prophecy to the tomb, without ever retreating. Each sorrow was like a step that raised her higher in holiness and union with God. As we contemplate Mary at this moment, we learn that sorrow, when lived with love and faith, does not destroy, but transforms. The woman who seemed defeated by sorrow became Queen of Heaven through fidelity. And thus, at the end of the way of sorrows, Mary shines like the dawn of the resurrection, showing that after the cross will come the victory of life.